So welcome to Delivering Headless Commerce. My name is Matt Glaman. I am a product lead at Commerce Guys. I am a Drupal Commerce co-maintainer. You might have read my book, the Drupal 8 Development Cookbook, and you may have used Contrib Kanban, which is a little tool I wrote a few years ago to help with sprints, things like that. So let's first dive into what is headless commerce. If you're in Ryan's session yesterday, we kind of touched on this a bit. The big thing is that it separates the customer experience layer from the business application, right? So you're separating concerns, which by separating those concerns, you can support any number of different front ends and from a single backend. Think if you shop Amazon, right? They have their mobile app, they have the web app, they have Alexa, they have dash buttons. And you can evolve and scale parts of your e-commerce system without impacting the others. So again, you think like you decouple something, you can work on it without ruining something over here. So let's look at some quick examples of what is a headless commerce implementation. So the basic one is, everybody here has heard of React.js, correct? Whether you like it or not, because I know there's Vue and there's the framework wars. Here's an example of using a React frontend that interfaces with a Drupal Commerce 2 backend. So right here, this widget is actually powered by GraphQL, and the product page is a mix of GraphQL and JSON API. All these are Drupal modules I will touch on in a moment. We have our cart API. Let's see, add it to the cart. So this is all JavaScript that's talking to a backend of Drupal, which means that it could be replaced with if you write in Flutter, which is like a mobile app SDK, or Vue, or React, or Angular, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And here we've replicated the added cart form. I think maybe this number's a smidge too long. But it's to show that it's like a fully actionable e-commerce website that's headless. So as we go through, it even has the cart. So here it applies a promotion, which this is no Drupal forms. There's no any of that layer back in there. So it applied the coupon. And one thing that we will be working on, I'll touch later in the slides, is like what it's like to do like a decoupled checkout, right? Because you want that fancy accordion, you want it to be slick and fast. Well, allow that to be slick and fast, it has to be in the front end on JavaScript. Or you could do a checkout offsite where it brings you to that singular backend, and you actually, this is Drupal. This is regular Drupal Commerce, regular Drupal checkout, but your different front ends could go to that one checkout form and have all the data here. But okay, JavaScript is cool, but let's take it maybe let's show this in all craziness. Who here has used Panoply on Drupal 7? All right, who's used panels in Drupal 7? Cool, this is when more people will relate to this. So here's an example of where we built CTools content types, which are your panels panes, and it renders in data. So there's an added cart form. As I change the added cart, it changed the SKU value, so now it's blue large. Add to cart. This is all just jQuery, by the way. So this kind of shows the robustness of this idea of multiple front ends for your singular backend. And I'm back at that singular checkout. Same backend, same checkout form, but I could have different entry points and different ways to shop. So there's just a few examples of what I mean by headless commerce. It's this idea of interacting with your one e-commerce site in multiple ways. There's some challenges to this, and that's going to be the whole part of delivering headless commerce. When it comes to e-commerce data in general, this isn't just Drupal Commerce. It's structured. It has a very structured data model. You have pricing, you have products, the variations. Are they blue, green? Are they small, medium, large? You have the multiple relationships and layers. You have an order that belongs to a store that has order items that say what you purchased. There's this relationship model that needs to be presented in an API. And the difficult part there is how do you differentiate what's part of the presentation layer and what's just actually part of the data? And that's the whole concept of decoupling, is ensuring your data layer can be represented in normal Drupal, like we do right now, or also in this API context. We have some available options for implementing these. I named a few of them off. There's GraphQL. Raise hands, how many people know what GraphQL, I've heard of GraphQL, I'll just do with GraphQL. Most people have. If you haven't, GraphQL was invented by Facebook, that turned into an open standard, and has kind of flourished, because we'll see why in a minute. JSON API, there's been a lot of buzz about it. It landed in core for 8.7, which is exciting for people that really want to use the module, and also for those that want to integrate with it. JSON API is a spec. It just says, here's a REST API that should follow this implementation standard, and we're going to show why that's a good thing in the next few slides. Core has always shipped with the RESTful Web Services module, which doesn't provide any, that's the little asterisk at the bottom. You can enable it, but it provides you no real help. It gives you a way to do like an API interface, but you have to write the code yourself. There is also the JSON RPC module, which I don't cover in here, but it is one of those things that I want to at least mention it. It creates a remote procedure call API input using JSON, but kept that out of the scope of this session. So first, let's talk about catalogs. Let's take standard Drupal, right? You have views and search API, and then you render your products, and you get this nice, pretty page, right? You get the image, you get the price that's properly formatted, you get the title, you can click on it, go to the product, you have faceted searching in the left. If you're not familiar with facets, Search API lets you, so Search API and facets, that creates like an abstraction layer for talking to a search index, like Solr or Elasticsearch, which lets you not have to query your database for catalogs. And then facets just provide a really awesome way to navigate that catalog. And this is kind of what you get out of the box. Views, this is powered by Views. So Views, there's a Search API query, gets you your data. Those index documents are enriched with entity data from Drupal, and you get this nice, fancy catalog. So that's some of the areas of concern. You know, you have a highly customized query for products, because that's how people are shopping. They want to drill down. You want to be able to filter what people are looking for. As I said, they're powered by search indexes, because you could use your database, but then your database is doing these epic queries, and yes, SQL, like MySQL, Postgres, all those are good for like epic queries, but this is the job for a search index. Search API does provide like a good stopgap of a database version, so you could use that. Faceted searches, like I said, for fine-tuned browsing, so that way you can say, I have this list of products, and I know my catalog has red, green, blue, but only the available products are in red. So I don't want to show blue or green because those aren't valid options. Then you have to worry about variable pricing on the catalog context. Do they have a coupon available? Is it Black Friday and everything's 20% off? Do we need to show that in the pricing? Because the default price is $9.99, but for Black Friday it's $7.99, and you need to be able to show that on the site. And then product availability, because you don't want to sell 10 extra items than you have and make 8 phone calls saying, sorry, we don't have the product, and you get cranky customers, and that's just a big old mess. So first, I want to talk about JSON API when it comes to catalogs. First, I really do love the JSON API spec because it makes querying, like in a RESTful context, amazing. Like it's just very verbose. And it allows you to include referenced entities. You just do this little include parameter, which I'll show later on. Say, I want this field, and it brings in that entity for you, so you don't need to do multiple requests. In a typical RESTful interface, you would have to do like a request for each resource, which let's say you have a product and you have you might do like 6 requests just to get all the product data, and that's kind of a pain. JSON API, the spec helps relieve that. It's declarative and discoverable. When I say that, it's like hypermedia. It provides a lot of links. So you reference this item, I will give you the link to go fetch it, so you don't have to hard code it into your client. There are some caveats. It doesn't support a mixed bundle collection. So all the routes it generates are /node/article. You can't go to /node and get your articles and pages. You would go /node/article /node/pages. That's kind of represented in here in my little, green, product/simple, product/clothing, red, /product. You can't just get like a collection of all your products, but you can with a little bit of legwork. It could integrate with Search API. Right now it does not. There is no way to use JSON API to talk to Search API to like get your search index documents. What I've been told by a few people is just query your Solr index directly. But I don't want to. Like I want to just have my middleware. Where I found that just knocked it out of the ballpark, and that's why the demo uses GraphQL, is GraphQL. So it's like it's a query-like language API. As you can see up here, so you say like commerce product query. I gave it some filters, like I wanted it to be from the audio and film category, and then I just kind of fleshed out my query a bit. So this is all the entities. And where it says ... on thing, like commerce product or commerce product clothing, that's called a fragment. And that's just a piece of like GraphQL terminology that says when you hit this schema type, do these things. And it knows that these are the available fields, which allows us to do cross-bundle querying. So that limitation that we hit in JSON API was blown away in GraphQL when building a catalog. Because I say, all right, on commerce product, well then we have simple products which don't have attributes. There's no color or size, but we have clothing too that we sell. And these allow you to purchase by color and size. So right here, it's almost like an if-else statement, like a bunch of if statements in my query. If you run into this document, pull in these fields for me. Now, we've all built Drupal sites, and we know that we might have 3 content types, and they share like the same 4 fields, right? And it's like, okay, well, you need to like pull those into context. So that's honestly what a lot of the boilerplate here is, and that's why I collapsed some of them. Luckily, with GraphQL, you can do reusable queries. I haven't dived into it quite yet, but there's this concept of a query map. You have to like download this other tool, point it at your point it to like a saved query. It generates this JSON that you can import to your Drupal site and say, I want my catalog query, and done. That can be useful once you have everything set in stone, but if you're developing, you can use this. And I did skip over the GraphQL IDE, which it's GraphIQL, and I think it's like GraphEqual is how they want you to pronounce it. I have no idea. If somebody does know after the session, please correct.
Graphical.
It's graphical. That makes way more sense. So with JSON API being declarative, you can just get a response and know how to work with it. With GraphQL, you need to go into an IDE. Now, it's just like a little JavaScript text editor that's really smart, and build your query. So that is one of the caveats, that you need to know how to query it. You need to pre-build your queries, not inside of your main client. GraphQL does have a Search API contrib module, which made me excited. There's caveats there. So it allows you to do full text query support. So when you say full text, that's where you can do like text matching. And you can get all kinds of craziness into it. You can have multiple conditions, and you can support facets. So I'm going to bring back to the facets statement when I said you have 5 products available, none of them come in red or blue. Why show those values to filter on? When you include those facet operations, it returns those values, but there's also a little asterisk there. It's not like working with the facets module or Search API in Drupal. It returns all the different index values. So how I had that product category that said audio & film, the facet showed audio and film as 2 options because I had them as full text instead of I want audio and film to be an option. So you have to rethink how you set up your Search API for just Drupal to now where you have this instance. And I'm hoping to help find ways that we can build like a Commerce GraphQL module to help kind of streamline some of these. So it acts, the other part I said before is Search API. When it gets that query, it actually loads your Drupal entities. And the Search API is basically just providing like, wait, what are the valid IDs to show? Cool, go back into Drupal and do the normal entity loading. With the GraphQL Search API module, it only returns data from the index, which is performant. We have done this on Drupal Commerce sites, where for performance, we denormalize the entity. So instead of having to say load out the fields, we save like, here's the structure of the product, put it into the Search API index, and then render that. So there is actually a performance boost in there, but again, you have to rethink how you index your data, which means that you can't do dynamic pricing as well, because that pricing is set to what was indexed. And then you just, it's not an impossible challenge, but you need to say, all right, after I get my products, how do I resolve the proper pricing to display? Little tricks that you have to come up with. So it's more like a middleware, or proxy, I think is a better word to say, to your Solar index instead of directly querying it. So next we'll go to product display pages, or PDPs, as I've come to hear them called. Before I just said product pages. So let's go to some area concerns there. This is always the hardest part, is it's marketing content, but also has this purchasing and product data. Right? It's like, I want to be able to put stuff here. It should be a marketing landing page, but I want people to buy from it. Well, if you make it a marketing page, people don't know how to buy from it. But that's the constant struggle. And that's also what just makes them, you know, a little bit more of a challenge, no matter how you're implementing them. You have to represent the available variations and their field values. Right? If it's a green product, you want to show the green images. If it's red, show the red images. If it has different pricing based on size, let's say there's a upcharge for the bigger box, you need the price to update and show that. How do you want the product attributes to display? Right? You don't want to just be a bunch of drop downs. You might want little color swatches. Maybe you want it to be images. And then there's the whole area of added cart forms, which I have as a next section. So I'm going to swing back to JSON API and kind of reiterate a few things. It's all about linking resources. So in that blob, you'll see it says links, self, and then the ref. Now, throughout, it will have those kind of documents, and that says this is how you fetch that resource. And it always includes them, because even if you call this product directly, what if you called it from another call and you need to know that URL? So you could build like a front-end client that can just go crawl it out. That's why it's called hypermedia, like the web is a bunch of links, which I do recommend. I'll add it to the slides after. I meant to link it into here, but about hypermedia so you can learn more about all of that. So it supports includes. I thought I got into the snippet, but the relationships, anything in the relationships, you could do like question mark includes. So you can get field brand, the categories, the stores, the variations, and you can limit what fields are returned. So when you do this, I did an experiment, and the next slide shows the return without the page load size. If you take, I want this product, and include the brand, the categories, the variations, the stores, it was like 50 kilobytes of JSON data. But once you do a proper filter, it was down to 6. That's because it has all the metadata in it, and it included like the created and changed timestamp, the default line code. There's things that need to be, it would be nice if they're automatically excluded, which will be coming down the pipeline. But once you tell it to like exclude those because they're not necessary, it's a much more reasonable payload to work with. But again, the routes require the bundle to be present. I have a little footnote there. If you have a product ID, you need to know if it's a simple product or a clothing product or a ebook or a physical book. We're working actively with the JSON API team to resolve this. Wim Lears and Gabe are very engaged with myself to help find out how we can work around these. And it's not just us either. The admin UI initiative is using JSON API. But they're having this issue on like the content admin page, right? /nodes. They had the same difficulties, and we are working to solve this. Now that it's in core, it's much easier to work with because they're not trying to get JSON API into core. So here's an example. The color scheme for Insomnia is a bad one, and I realized on the up here I couldn't get it to not be yellow. But on the left, I hope you can see all the query parameters that help bring things down, and then load the included. Is that impossible to read? Yep. Yeah. Sorry.
I can read the caption at the bottom.
I will be uploading the slides, and I'll try to share it out to show the example. Apologies. And then we'll go to GraphQL for the product pages. Again, just like catalogs, it's pretty much the same thing. It allows supporting the included entities. You can, again, specify the required fields. So in here, I have it pulling in the price, and then on the product variation clothing, including the images, the specific derivative. So it's actually giving me my image style with the URL, the width and height, so I can pass it into my little React component and render the image appropriately. Like you could take one of those fancy placeholders that does like the gloss over, because you know the width and height, and then once the URL is fetched, load it in. Add to cart forms. they're kind of critical because you want people to buy your product and like be able to take their money. So you need an added cart form for that to work. Again, these are probably some of the hardest parts besides checkout. Well, not hardest, but just most critical parts to get right. I brought up before, attribute select list versus fancy formatting. Do you want that select list? Do you want select list? Radio buttons, little rendered swatches. Who knows? I did a site where they sold car seats, like customizable car seats, and they wanted the color options to be like actual images of the versions of the car seats. Not just a color swatch, but like an image they could upload. You also have to identify the currently selected variation. Okay, you've picked blue, green, and then let's say there's this third optional attribute. You have to figure out how to resolve what they are purchasing based off what they've given you. Then custom order item fields. This is one of the most robust things about Drupal Commerce. Is you could say, all right, you're going to buy a t-shirt, well, you can custom engrave it. So I'm going to give you a text box to type in 30 characters so we can print it on your shirt. Or I worked on a project where they had trophies, and you could upload an image that they would etch onto it. That's one of the huge benefits of Drupal Commerce, and also something that needs to be displayed on the add to cart form. As I said, it's a critical part, which also makes it challenging to provide abstractions and reusable solutions. I'm going to go through a few examples of different add to cart forms I've built, and not once have I been able to reuse a single thing, except for this like functional array map, array reduce, array filter, crazy snippet. So let's go to like our current demo. This is Drupal Commerce with our Cart Flyout module. And the Cart Flyout module progressively decouples Drupal. It just says, instead of Drupal still serving the formatting, but then JavaScript pops in and is like, I'll do the add to cart form and your cart block. So this is using jQuery, backbone, and underscore to kind of render things out. And for the most part, it's near feature parity to like our pure PHP normal static version, except for order item fields. Because it's like, how do you know that needs to be a text field or a select list? There's all these questions. We'll go to the React demo. This is what we just saw. I didn't get a chance to build in the image variation swapping because you need to know all the available fields, go into there, swap it out. But it does at least know if I pick green, then small or large. Okay, I didn't hit add to cart. But it knows what I properly added. And then last year, I built a Gatsby.js site that reads the Drupal Commerce backend and builds an add to cart form. And I was able to get the image variations to work and change out as they go. And a lot of that's because Gatsby reads from a remote source and creates their own consolidated data format that you read via GraphQL. So it made it easier to like know certain things. And then to the good old Drupal 7 version, this is pure jQuery, which was fun managing the state. But I was able to fetch the product via JSON API, and I was able to know all the different variations. And my select list said, this is the active UUID. Tell me the product fields that I know are available. So the challenging part as a framework maintainer is to provide the abstract and reusable components for purpose-built front ends. And JavaScript, like Drupal, you can customize a twig template, you can do a pre-process, do all these things to alter how a page looks. It's not that way in JavaScript. You build on, what does React call it? High order components, okay, where you just like kind of stack and build things up. You can't just swap something out in the middle and say, use this component. There's tricks to do that. So the idea is, how can we help people build these? We're going to figure that out, and hopefully I'll come across some really super front-end people that say you can't just build good examples, or we find ways to just help make this easier for everyone to deliver these kind of projects without having to go through this kind of code salad. It's not meant to be readable, but on the left is the backbone and underscore. The middle is the just pure jQuery, and on the right is like Gatsby.js. The only thing that's reusable is like knowing what is taking the attributes and trying to figure out the proper variation. So the next step is carts. This is, if you caught my road to Headless Commerce last year, this was our big focus. Like, all right, how can we at least manage carts in a decoupled fashion? Because why are carts hard? They need to belong to anonymous and authenticated users. Users can modify their carts, but they shouldn't be able to just like delete them or like edit things that aren't the order items. You need to have constraints on product availability. Should they be able to add something to the cart that's not available, go to checkout. And people shouldn't be able to edit other people's carts, right? I shouldn't be able to figure out your order ID and be able to start adding things to your cart mid-checkout, and then you pay all this money. So with the Cart API module, it's a bespoke module that we built that uses Core's REST module. And it helps hide some of the internals for adding something to the cart. It provides a Git collection to give you all the active carts for a current user. And we say that because you could have multiple carts. Our system does allow that. A post that lets you say, I have this purchasable entity, I have this quantity, add them to the carts for me. And patch to update those quantities. And that's a little sample of like fake requests. But what I came up with over the past 6 months is this idea of like a cart token. As soon as you're in like React and you're doing CORS requests, cross-origin requests, cookies are ignored, which means your PHP session is ignored, which means that you're always creating new carts every time you add an order. So the workaround is you basically pass this custom token as either a header or query parameter. We couldn't use authorization because what if you are using like OAuth or other authorization headers? And this basically allows it to work in a cross-domain and cross-origin interface. So even if your React app is on the same domain, it's still cross-origin because it might have like front-end dot and API dot or cross-origin, or you could have myawesomebrand.com with myawesomebackend.com, and they won't even communicate cookies at all. I found out Firefox and Chrome will, but Brave and Safari will not. So luckily I caught that before doing the demos and everything just broke. JSON API. This has been like the point of communication the most is they really want the Cart API module to just use JSON API. I do too, because it provides all those fancy includes and fields. You can really customize your cart flyout. Again, there's no cross bundles, so you can't just say /cart. We're working on it. I have it working. It's broken for JSON API in Core, but it worked for JSON API 2.3. So we're getting close. Now it's in Core. I can just make things work. So it provides that custom cart collection. Right now, adding a product to the cart requires knowing I need to create an order item, then attach that order item to the cart. It's very internal. You need to know the internals. We want to abstract that out into a more, and still keep it like a RESTful interface. GraphQL, you can get to carts, but you can't add anything, because in GraphQL they're called mutations. I didn't get a chance to experiment with this because they actually ripped mutations out of the core module to put it as a contrib, because there's just hard things about updating content. And I totally meant to put, that's a query for getting cart. I wanted to put a fake mutations query in there, but I had this demoable and working. Getting close on time, so let's go to the checkout and more. This is the thing that made me happy. Applying coupons headlessly, because coupon validation is hard, and I could not figure it out last year, and it was like my number one, we need to figure out how to make this possible outside of the checkout form and more reusable. So we actually used Drupal's validation system. It implements symphonies. We added a constraint to the field. So when you go to validate an order, it says, okay, coupons, do you apply to this order? Are you still available? If it's not, throw an error. If it is, get the promotion. Is the promotion still valid? If not, throw an error. And all the API modules validate entities before saving. So if you apply an invalid coupon code, it throws an error, and it just quote unquote works. So this got me really excited. One thing that's not shown in here that I'm working to get pushed into our code base is this order subtotal. Right now, orders only have their total price. The subtotal and all the adjustments are calculated in a field formatter. Can't use formatters over an API. So it uses a computed base field, and this just got really technical. But the point will be, hopefully, soon you'll be able to get that information from like a field instead of this extra process. And finally, check out over the API. I went down this road last year and just found a bunch of our core underlying problems. The same problems that Drupal core had when the API First initiative kicked off. Taking stuff out of the presentation layer and moving it more and more down to the bare minimum of the data layer. It's hard because there's a lot of things to put down there, but I would love it if by DrupalCon Amsterdam we have a working prototype some way. Don't hold me to it, but at least somewhat of a working demo. And really, it's just taking form validation logic and putting it into like the core data level. We have all this logic, but it's stuck in a form, and form validate and form submit. So now we need to see how we can abstract that down to a more primitive level. With that, to headless and beyond. What's next? That top one actually got committed by Boyan today. And that prevents you from needing like an internationalization library. When you fetch a price, it's going to auto-format it into your currency. It's going to provide a formatted property that formats it into your currency and locale. So if you're API smart, which Drupal Commerce, because of Drupal, is really great at multi-currency and multi-language, we'll say, oh, it's in euros. Cool, you're in the United States. We'll put the euro sign first, then 1,00. Oh, you're not, you're in Europe, we'll put 1.00, and then the euro sign. And the API will just do that for you, instead of having to write the crazy JavaScript I had to write when first doing the demos. The next step is improving query access and entity access. Entity API now has implemented the Drupal 7 query access, which means that we can take a lot of our logic and helpers out of forms and field formatters and put it into the core logic. Coupon validation constraint, that's what I just demoed. I think we're going to hopefully get that in for the next week, and then it's just coming up with the API endpoints. In development, this is the technical part, the computed base fields that just say, this isn't like stored in the database, but when you fetch me, we're going to run something and give you the data. This gives you the order total, adjustments, resolved pricing, so that comes into the dynamic pricing aspects. And then coupon redemption. What I showed, you would have to apply it with that coupon ID. I want to find a way that you can actually give that coupon code and apply it without needing like a custom REST endpoint. So that way JSON API and GraphQL can use it. And finally, I want to make sure you give a shout out for this. Contribution day is tomorrow from 10 to 4. Bring a laptop. There will be coffee. The three major areas will be the D9 Readiness Initiative. Unami, the out-of-the-box demo, is trying to translate their content to Spanish. So if you are someone who speaks Spanish or knows it, it'd be great to help get your assistance to really show this multilingual capability that Drupal has. And also the Admin initiative for the Claro theme. If you're a CSS wizard or a design wizard, there's work for you. There are things you could contribute to. With that, I don't think I have any time for questions. Do I have 2 minutes? Nope. Okay, done. There you go. If you want to give it a spin, go to react.demo.centauro.io. That's the main demo there. If you want to see like the progressive decoupling demo, which is our like default, it is demo.kickstart.com. And if you are curious for the Gatsby.js one, it's not too flashy. It's gatsbyjs.demo.centauro.io. And thank you very much. How much did I